What's up, guys? In this video I'm going to be telling you about this really powerful technique that I learned recently on how to actually learn things and remember them forever. Because a lot of the times when students, for example, are learning something, they take the exam and then what happens in the near future? They forget everything that they studied. So there was no point to it at all except to get the letter grade. And before I knew about this, I actually wasted so much time because you basically remember like 1% of what you study if you don't do what I'm going to describe in this video. So I literally wasted so much time because I forgot like 99% of the, for example, books that I read and these sorts of things because I didn't apply this technique. So, anyways, what it's called is spaced repetition, and it's, to sum it up quickly, it is a memorization technique where a person studies something for the first time and then reviews it at certain intervals that are expanding at an exponential rate. So each interval is not just like twice as large as the last one, for example. It's going to be like exponential. So for example, say you review something 3 months after you learn it, and then you next time you review it is like a year and a half from then, or something like that, or a year or something like that. So the basic pattern for it is not particularly defined. There are a lot of different options that people have. Some people say that you should review something 10 minutes after you learn it, but others say that you should review it like a day after or so. I think if you review it 10 minutes after, that's a good thing to do. But one of the keys to using this technique and to remember everything and have it in your long term memory forever, which will increase the amount of bandwidth that your brain has to work with at the present moment for anything. If you're, for example, working on something and you're applying your long term knowledge versus utilizing some of your short term memory while you're working on something, which would leave you less bandwidth to focus on and come up with creative or just efficient solutions for whatever the task at hand is. Anyways, what you need to keep in mind while you do the review sessions is that you should be doing active learning, not passive learning. So what this means is that you should not just be reading your notes, for example. You should be actively trying to recall things and bring them up from your memory instead of just reading them on a screen. An example of this is using flashcard on a website like Quizlet, for example. You can make your own flashcards, and then the flashcard will show with the name of a term, for example, and then you think, what is this term? Like, what is a pulmonary circuit? Oh, a pulmonary circuit. You remember it in your head. You say, oh, a pulmonary circuit is the circulatory pathway from the heart to the lungs back to the heart in mammals. So that's an example of active learning. And when you do active learning, it really helps your brain retain the information for a lot longer. And using the technique that I've outlined in this video, you'll be able to remember things forever. What I would recommend doing is making a spreadsheet. I'll show you. I made a spreadsheet on Google Sheets right over here. So that's how I did it. And that way you can keep track of the times that you do things and you can review them at the appropriate times. And you can basically choose your own schedule for it because I was doing a lot of research on it and there's no single consensus on what's the best way to implement this technique. Now, the way that this technique was discovered is pretty interesting. There was a guy, he was a researcher or scientist or something, and what he did was he conducted a long-term experiment on himself. And what he did was he memorized strings of alphabet letters, but it was completely nonsensical. They were not actual words. It was just randomly assembled letters. So he would test how long it would take him to forget them or how much he could remember, like percentage wise and this sort of thing. And he graphed it out over a long period of time. He would keep going with new and new strings, combinations of letters, and he would test how well he remembered those old ones with the passage of time. And he created something amazing called the forgetting curve, and I would highly recommend looking into it, because what he discovered is that with those subsequent reviews of the information, particularly with active learning, you can retain the memory and actually move it into your long-term memory. Because if you don't do this, you won't even be able to move into your long-term memory. So with the spaced repetition, you can move it into your long-term memory, especially with active recall, which will help you retain the information better. And the curves of forgetting will flatten out more each time you do a review session. So say for example, the first time you look at something, the curve is steep, but then each subsequent review, the curve flattens out more and more, and you end up remembering a much larger proportion of the total information that you studied in the long term. Say for example, 2 years later or 10 years later, as two examples right there. And that's it for this video, guys. If you enjoy it, leave a like, subscribe down below. I would highly recommend doing more research into the topic. I found it very fascinating. Peace.